This single chapter solves two of the most enduring mysteries in all of the One Piece, and it solves them painfully casually. Like if you're not paying attention even for a second, then you miss them. But then this chapter, mate, it has the audacity to go on and replace those with a new mystery, being Dr. Vegapunk's final message for those rare individuals carrying the will of D. We'll get to that, but we need to start with the actual big news first. Because this chapter, it immediately thwacks you in the nutsack with three names that I never expected to hear again. And those names are Don Krieg, Gin, and the Invincible Pearl. This is a blink and you'll miss it sort of cameo. I think it would be so easy to blast past this initial panel and be none the wiser. But on the right here, that is our boy with his other boy, and on the left is a third boy. And I have to say, Don Krieg, he is looking shockingly good. I'm a huge fan of the new look with the longer hair, because when you combine that with his bulky stature, he reminds me a lot of Vice Admiral Gaspard from One Piece Movie 4 Dead End Adventure, which is a very favorable comparison. In the pantheon of One Piece villains, even though he's non-canon, Gaspard is a pretty solid one to emulate. And I mean, this whole situation is just surreal. I and most of the fan base, I think, were convinced that Gin had died from Krieg's poison, which is why Oda never showed them again, because that revelation would be a bit morbid. But not only did Gin survive, but he and the Krieg pirates, or at least those three, ended up getting their shit together and reigniting their ambition to travel into the Grand Line, and have now ended up in the new world on Hachinosu, and they may very well be part of Blackbeard's fleet, which is an idea that excites me muchly, because it sets up a potential Gin-Sanji reunion. And something very notable about Gin is that he now appears to be a swordsman, rather than wielding his trademark tonfa, which, look, not to fillet Zoro too much this early, because we're going to get to a lot of that later on in the chapter, but just saying, maybe Gin watched Zoro versus Mihawk and decided, mate, you know what? Swords are pretty cool after all. I also feel like I've been on a bit of a Krieg appreciation tour lately, and this is hitting at just the right time. I analyzed him for the Villain Tier List project, but before that, I also made a video about the impact of leaving him out of the live action. Well, not leaving him out, but significantly reducing his role, which was big. People thought they didn't need Krieg. People were wrong. He is so important, and his purpose was not really filled by anything else. And so maybe this cameo was done by Oda as a bit of an apology to the character for how the live action dismissed him. But I loved this cameo. And for some inside information on how I make these fun video things, what I do is I divide my thoughts into subsections, and the title for this subsection is Don fucking Krieg ? And from there we catch up with more dudes, the Saruyama Alliance and Mont Blanc Cricket, which, if you don't remember them, they were the 3C wreckage salvaging diving pirate captain guys that the Straw Hats met during Jaya. And Cricket may have been wrong about where to search for the golden city of Shandora, but he was smack bang on the money for finding every other hidden treasure on this planet. He has always had his sights set downwards. And after having the flood theory confirmed, these guys are in a very good position because they're one of the few organizations who have the infrastructure and the expertise to actually dive down and discover this hidden world. So hearing all of this from Vegapunk, which is horrifying news for most of the world over there, but back over here in fun diving land, it is an invitation for adventure. They've been told that there is a whole new world, or old world, waiting for them down there. And this may very well be the greatest day of Mont Blanc Cricket's life. Well, maybe second to when Luffy confirmed that Shandora existed in the sky. But we do actually know what these three are currently searching for, because on the cover of chapter 643, we were informed that they were on the hunt for Necroa, known as the Island of Dreams. And also, in honor of Luffy, Shoujo now wears a straw hat. But these dudes are ready to discover all of the secrets of the world, because remember, the true history of the world of One Piece is effectively being gatekept by water. Many water. And there's a veritable void centuries worth of content out there in the real world as well, completely inaccessible to you due to reasons. Thankfully, we have the sponsor of this video, CyberGhost VPN, a virtual private network with over 38 million users worldwide and over 11,000 servers across 100 countries, which allows you to mask your IP address and, above all, encrypt your data and redirect all your internet traffic through a secure tunnel, so you can surf safely, privately, and freely. To put it in more simplistic terms, I'm a big fan of the British TV show Taskmaster, because they do funny things and I like to watch them. However, they don't like me watching them, because all of their episodes are uploaded to YouTube, but only if you live in the UK, which I do not. Or do I? With CyberGhost VPN, I can quite easily hop over the pond for a couple of hours to claim the content that I, man on the internet, don't necessarily deserve, but do definitely want and have the ability to attain. CyberGhost unblocks more than 40 streaming platforms, including Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Disney Plus and BBC iPlayer. Plus, they have a no logs policy, so no record or storage of customer data. So you can and should try CyberGhost VPN through my link in the description, where you can get 84% off. So that's $2.10 a month plus 4 months free. And there's a 45-day money-back guarantee, so this is a risk-free proposition. With apps available on all of the things: Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, smart TVs, gaming consoles, and even Linux for all of you Linux people. So give CyberGhost a go, your freedom awaits. But for now, it's back to you, me. So after seeing the Monkey Mountain guys, we then cut to a marine hospital where all of the young Sword members are gathered around Kobe, and these guys are doing it pretty rough. This is definitely a narrative low point for them, because the loss of Garp is still a very recent event and morale, it's not super high. Although what we have is a ray of hope from Kujaku of all people. I was not expecting such positivity from the building whipping dominatrix, but she said something that I really like, which is that, it's their turn to stand up and do something now. Because the 5 young Marines in this room represent the future of the entire organization. Kobe, who has inherited the will of Garp, Hibari, who is 99% confirmed to be Sakazuki's daughter, and Kujaku herself, whose grandmother is Vice Admiral Suru. This is it. This is the future right here. And it's now time for them to inherit the world, in the same way that the worst generation have now carved their place in the world on the side of piracy. I also really appreciated getting to see Sword Captain Diaz Drake again. I have no idea how he got off Wano, but here he is recovering, and it's a very rare sight because we get to see him without his mask, which reminds me a lot of this artwork I have of Formal Drake, which I almost never use because he just doesn't look like him without the mask. But going forward, there's even a chance that he may never put the mask back on, because metaphorically, he's been unmasked. We know that he's no pirate. His secret mission has come to an end, and so there's no need to hide. And then good morning, finally, to you, Mr. Smoker. Good of you to join us. But I do have one small question, which is exactly what the crap have you been up to? He's on the ocean, alone, vrooming with his smoke bike, which I actually do kind of like, because it's very reminiscent of Kuzan cycling across the ocean by making an ice path. But we haven't seen Smoker since the Dressrosa arc. He's been strangely absent and not at all in command of his G5 Marines, even leaving Toshigi to help the Sword members invade Hachinosu all on her own. And so I do wonder if this does have something to do with Kuzan. Smoker and Kuzan have a, how shall we say, special friendship. In fact, the very first time we met Kuzan, Smoker had given him, a Marine Admiral, a message to deliver to Luffy. But Kuzan decided that the message was stupid and didn't deliver it. But the last time these two came into contact was Punk Hazard, and I wonder if Smoker's absence can be explained by something that Kuzan may have asked him to do. So Smoker spent some time recovering during the Dressrosa arc, but since then, he's been out on his own. Although it looks like he's finally about to rejoin Toshigi at the hospital, just in time for some sort of final saga to play out. And then we arrive at the undisputed highlight of the chapter, being Zoro versus an Elder Star. And not just any Elder Star, like the coolest Elder Star, because Ethan arrives and he plans to do bad things like killing and destroying, which first of all results in this panel showing Lilith, Usopp, and Chopper doing the Gear 5th eye pop. Probably shouldn't be reading into this too much, but it is very curious. Artistically, eye popping isn't a new feature in One Piece. It was used pre-Gear 5th for comic effect, but this specific style of eye popping was never used before Gear 5th. So Oda is continuing to blur the lines between fictional reality and the even more fictional reality that morphs according to Luffy's imagination, because Gear 5th isn't active and yet this is still happening. So my inclination would be to write this off and say that Oda just enjoys drawing the style of eye pop, but it has been noted. I will not forget it because it could be indicative of something greater down the line, like the joy of the Joy Boy spreading through the world like some sort of joy-based STD. And it's also not the only curious inconsistency in this chapter either. To move to that, Zoro's clash with Ethan was glorious, and I love the panel where he's attacking Ethan from the side because the sense of scale is quite trippy, especially because we've now confirmed the long-time speculation that Ethan is in possession of the Shodai Kitetsu, the final and the best of all of the Kitetsu blades. And mate, it is massive. Usually scale is very subjective and it's very difficult to pin down, but in this case, we are seeing 2 Kitetsu blades in the same panels. And the Shodai Kitetsu is colossal compared to the Sandai Kitetsu. To be fair, the Shodai Kitetsu has usually been portrayed as a bit of a big boy, but definitely nowhere near as big as it is in this chapter. At this stage, as ridiculous as it sounds, I think we have to believe that swords grow and shrink according to their wielder. Because to bring out one of my favorite graphics, there is no way that both Zoro and Kozuki Oden could both use Enma, given that Oden is more than 2 Zoros tall. And with this scale, Enma should be taller than Zoro. Perhaps this could be something unique to cursed blades, but that is our second note of reality kind of bending in this chapter. And there's also a third. Because something else that I found very curious is that Oda drew the sword without its guard. And I don't know if this is just a continuity error, but in this chapter, the Shodai Kitetsu is missing its trademark guard. The same guard that all the Kitetsu blades have, which we have previously seen being used by Ethan in his hybrid form, but now it looks more like a Shirayasa blade, like the ones that Kaku favors using. Here's the thing, I don't think this is a mistake, if only because Oda directly mentions the Kitetsu name in this chapter. It's not like he just forgot what he was drawing. So something very interesting is happening here with the changing of size and even the type of sword that the Shodai Kitetsu is. That's 3 odd reality shifting things that have happened in this section, but we're gonna move on because what matters is that this opens up a whole new avenue of fun questions. Because the Shodai Kitetsu was made by the OG Mr. Kitetsu man, and we have no idea how old the original Kitetsu actually is. But if we follow his lineage back, it was Kozuki Sukiyaki who made the Sandai Kitetsu, and he was the descendant of Kotetsu who made the Nidai Kitetsu. He was the descendant of Kitetsu, which means that our Kitetsu was potentially the shogun of Wano at some point, and I think he would be a great candidate to have been the shogun during the Void Century. And the fact that the world government have his prized creation, the Shodai Kitetsu, is a bit of a brag, a spoil of war, something to really rub their victory in, and to use the weapon of the enemy to continue subjugating the enemy. Which I bring up because that could make things very personal for Zoro. I did not expect Zoro to form any sort of feelings towards any of the 5 elders, but he immediately recognizes what this sword is and where it belongs, which is not in the possession of the world government. This blade belongs on Wano, something to potentially be laid to rest like Shusui was at Ryuma's grave. So if there's an endgame where the Straw Hats do end up fighting directly against the world government, and look, it's still hard to say if there is. I've always been of the opinion that dealing with the Blackbeard pirates is very much their final task. And meanwhile, over here, the Revolutionary Army and maybe some rebellious Marines would deal with the world government. But I could be very wrong because I'm not sure if I see Zoro letting this go. His respect for swords and also swordsmen is just far, far too high. And those swordsmen include Ethan, by the way. Zoro wants to be the world's greatest swordsman, and this guy, he is pretty damn good. According to this chapter, at least as good as Zoro. So look, you may need to beat him as well. And I think it's implied that both Ethan and Zoro recognize the Kitetsu qualities of one another, which may also put Zoro on Ethan's radar. I'm very surprised that Ethan in any way cares that Zoro has a Kitetsu blade, so this clearly means something to him personally as well. And I feel like this clash was a brief moment of respect between 2 swordsmen. They struck, they flexed their cocks, by which I mean they flexed their color of Conqueror's haki. They recognized the qualities of one another's blade, nice sword bro, and they repelled one another. It's like the samurai equivalent of Romeo and Juliet seeing each other across the room. Neither Zoro nor Ethan are going to forget about this, and from here they'll spend each and every night longing for one another until they can achieve the satisfaction of slice battling one another again. But there's another pairing I'm becoming a big fan of, which is the dynamic of Zoro and Jinbei. Jinbei was the perfect support fighter in this chapter, as he both launched Zoro at Ethan and was the one to catch him after the clash. And this is the magic of Jinbei that I've been keen to see ever since he said he would join the crew but then didn't twice, because he's a mature figure that, unlike Zoro, Sanji, and even Luffy, recognizes that he doesn't have to be front and center. He doesn't have to be the star taking the stage. So Jinbei is always looking for opportunities to use his abilities to augment others. And that tends to result in a perfect flowing synergy between Jinbei and whoever happens to be with him. Elsewhere on Egghead Island, Luffy, Dory, and Broggy are about to catch up to the giant warrior pirate ship, which I thought would be a pretty easy escape from here. The elders, they've all left off to deal with the Iron Giant, so there's nothing that could cause us too much trouble, right? But Vice Admirals Dole and Bluegrass are really pulling their weight here, and it's such an unfortunate combination of powerhouse characters, because we have the incredibly capable Sanji. He's up again after a bit of a fall, but it doesn't matter because both of these opponents are women, so they have complete immunity against Sanji's. And Dole, mate, she is absolutely not to be taken lightly. She wallops the crap out of, I think, Kashi, in the same sort of way that Luffy easily disposed of Harudin back in the Corridor Coliseum. But speaking of Luffy, I guess I'm not too worried, because without any of the elders chasing him, Luffy is probably steamrolling through whatever gets plonked in front of him. This is it though. We are about to escape and end the Egghead Island arc. which I'm both incredibly excited for because Elbaf, but also very sad about because Egghead, oh, it's been so good. However, we're not leaving before Vegapunk gets to say one more thing, a very special message for the denizens of the world who happen to carry the Will of D. And we see some of them. Actually, when the Will of D is mentioned, we see more characters without the D than we do with the D. And naturally, D swingers like Law and Garp are currently out of action, so they're represented by Kobe and Beppo, the second of which is itself a cool little update. The fact that Beppo has managed to get Law to safety and that he's found some medical attention to patch up his Blackbeard wounds. Meanwhile, one of the actual Ds we do see is Blackbeard himself in a very curious panel that shows him spinning around to pay attention specifically at this moment. It's like a, huh? Which I think implies that he's only been sort of half listening to Vegapunk's entire message. Everyone else we see is looking straight on at either the screen or the snail speaker, but Blackbeard isn't. It's almost as if he's a bit bored listening to Vegapunk, and that might be because he already knows everything that's being said. A long time ago, Eiichiro Oda stated that one of Blackbeard's hobbies was historical research, and that if he was not a pirate, then Teach would have become an archaeologist, which has always made some degree of sense. It was like a backdoor excuse for him being able to find the poneglyphs and such. But this hobby could actually be much, much more. With his passion for archaeology, this may be old news for Blackbeard, who already knows about the Lost World. Perhaps he's even already explored some of it, which means the only interesting part of Vegapunk's message is what he didn't know, and as punishment for his lack of attention, he may now never know. Because that is the point where the 5 elders finally stop the message. Which is a bit of a narrative blue balls moment, but in the message getting interrupted, it was expected. It's very cliche One Piece. Like when Professor Clover got shot before he could reveal the name of the ancient kingdom. But my thinking is that the Vegapunks have predicted the future to a scary degree of perfection, and that maybe since this is the final saga, a fantastic way to kick things off and to signal that we're really going all out here would be for the broadcast to suddenly restart. For Vegapunk to have one final backup to get this information out into the world. Otherwise, I think it's very fair for history to judge him as the man who prioritized using this valuable time making coffee over revealing the truth to the world, something that only Vice Admiral Kommel would be capable of appreciating. So to put this out there is a lot of blind hope happening from my side here, but I want to believe that the smartest man in the world and his satellite selves saw this coming, and that all of this is still part of a clever ruse to lure the elders to Egghead Island, to use the time delay and the coffee stuff as bait to make the elders think that they had a chance of stopping this before broadcasting their true forms to the world. I mean, the Iron Giant even got up and plonked himself in the middle of the island, making himself a very easy target. So I might be reading too much into this, but the end of the message feels deceptively simple. But the real question is, what was Dr. Vegapunk about to say regarding those with the Will of D? And this is a very tricky topic. At the moment, all we have is the character Mo, which is in hiragana, and that may be important. And Mo is also the name of the chapter, which means even less to us as English speakers than it does to native Japanese speakers. And I am incredibly keen to see how the official translation tackles this, because this might be the most difficult challenge that they've ever had. Because sure, they know the sound Mo, but whatever that Mo is forms part of a word or is a particle that probably doesn't start with Mo if said in English. But there's already a huge deluge of theories about what Vegapunk was about to say, all of which we're going to go through in the next video.